What's up, gang? Carolina Jackpot checking in. It is September 27th, 2016, and we are already in week 5 of the college football season. So it's time to give you the college football picks and predictions for week number 5, September 30th, 2017's weekend. It's hard to believe that we are already in week 5, but here we are. And some interesting games coming up this week. We got 20 of them to pick so far for the year. Carolina Jackpot 33-27 versus the spread. Let's see if we can improve on that. Last week was a pretty good week, 13-7. Really much welcomed after the bad week in week 3. Let's get right into it. Miami and Duke play on Friday night in Durham. I'm going to take Miami in this game to cover the 6.5 point spread. They are favored on the road against the Blue Devils. Duke's doing pretty well this year. I believe they're undefeated. However, they got a really talented quarterback up there, but they don't have a lot of talent around him from what I've seen. And I just think Miami's going to be too much for them. Hurricanes probably going to be representing the ACC Coastal in the ACC championship game against whoever wins the Atlantic, barring Virginia Tech loss sometime down the road or when they play. So I'm going to take Miami in this game to cover the spread at Duke, 6.5 points. Miami will probably win by a couple of touchdowns. Should be over by the middle of the fourth quarter. USC, the Trojans are at Washington State late Friday night. Well, it's late for us anyway. 3.5 point favorites. I'm going to take the Trojans to cover the spread here. Washington State has put up a lot of points. They're undefeated also, but they really haven't played anybody. One of those wins against Boise State, which is an overtime game they went to at home. Boise State, I'm no longer really impressed with. Lost to Virginia at home last week. I mean, that's just kind of embarrassing for them. I know Virginia may be a little bit trying to improve there, but that's still, that just shouldn't happen. So I'm not sold on them at all. I'm going to take USC to cover the spread in that game. They've had a couple of games where they didn't really play that well. They're ranked number 5 right now. It's start for them to start looking like the playoff contender that they're supposed to be. Vanderbilt on the road at Florida. What can you say? Vanderbilt last week was just totally annihilated at home against Alabama. Apparently they were talking some smack to Alabama, something, or one of their players was, after they beat Kansas State. And I mean, that was a good win for them. And last week's showing was pretty pathetic. I mean, they don't get that kind of opportunity very often at Vanderbilt, but they did, and they blew it. So it's time to regroup. That certainly doesn't kill their season. Vanderbilt's a place where you're kind of, if you go 6-6 and make a bowl game, you've done great. But this game at Florida was kind of a tricky pick. I went back and forth on this for a while, and I'm going to go with Vanderbilt to cover the spread in this game. Florida switched quarterbacks now. They've gone back to Luke Del Rio, who was the quarterback for most of last year, and he did lead them to a victory in the game against Kentucky, which I don't understand. Kentucky should have won that game. They had the game won. They were up by 13 points, in the fourth quarter, and they ended up crapping the bed. I think there are some teams that just don't know how to win the big game, just don't know how to win the big ones. Kentucky, one of those. There's no way. They should have been able to put the nail in the coffin and win that game. As it were, they lost their 400th in a row to Florida. But Florida's not that good. They've lost so many talented players, and still, only one loss on the year. But man, that's that team. I think they're on a downward spiral. There's no way they're going to make it back to the SEC championship game again. with all the stuff they've got going on down there. I'll be lucky if that coach is still around at the end of the year. I'm going to take Vanderbilt in this one to cover the spread. Not necessarily take the Commodores to win, but, you know, I mean, on offense, definitely more talented. Definitely more talented than Florida. Ralph Webb, Kyle Shermer is coming into his own there as your quarterback at Vandy. They got some decent receivers. They're definitely more talented on the offensive side of the ball than Florida is, especially after they lost, you know, half of their team to the credit card scandal. Defensively, I think they both match up pretty well. So I'm going to take Vanderbilt to cover the spread in the game. I don't necessarily think that they're going to end up winning it, but they very well could. They could very well win that game and cover the spread, but I don't think they will. I think they're going to lose by like a touchdown. This is one interesting one. New Mexico State on the road at Arkansas. You know, Arkansas lost last week. Overtime game to Texas A&M. That's got to take a lot out of a team. A 50-43 loss. Had to be pretty disappointing. Arkansas can score some points. Obviously, their defense has some major issues, and New Mexico State. That's just another team there that you can't sleep on. New Mexico State whatsoever. Decent team. I was looking at some of their games this year. They have. Let me pull them up here because I can't remember all the stuff off the top of my head. You look at New Mexico State has lost to. They lost to Arizona State and New Mexico. They beat New Mexico, which is a decent team, and lost on the road to Arizona State by a touchdown. They lost to Troy by 3 points, and they massacred UTEP last week. So this is another one where I don't think the New Mexico State Aggies are going to win the game, but I do think they'll cover the spread and keep the game against Arkansas close, at least into the fourth quarter. North Carolina on the road at Georgia Tech. This is a hard one for me to figure out. North Carolina's 1-3 right now. They've lost to Cal, Louisville, and then last week lost their Victory Bell game to Duke at home. They're on the road at Georgia Tech, which can be a difficult place to play, I guess. Of course, Georgia Tech can run the ball like crazy. North Carolina, as usual, doesn't play great defense. But I think North Carolina's going to cover the spread in this game. They're 1-3. If they don't win this one, their season's going down the crapper pretty quick. I know that they are in rebuilding mode there. But, I mean, let's face it, they do compete in the ACC Coastal, which is, you know, like the SEC East talent-wise, if you want to look at that way. And you know, if you know, going like 4-8, 3-9, something like that's just really unacceptable. So I do look for them to rally the troops and play well this week at Georgia Tech. I look for them to cover the spread and win that game. Syracuse on the road at NC State. I'm going to take the Wolfpack to cover the spread in this one. Week 1 lost to my Gamecocks. You know, looking like right now that was kind of fluky. The North Carolina State's been playing pretty well as of late. 2 wins in a row. They had Marshall and Furman, and last week went on the road, beat FSU in Tallahassee, which I thought that they would. I predicted that, and they did do it. Really good defensive line there. Syracuse kind of been an inconsistent team so far this year. Had a couple of easy wins at home, and then a decent showing on the road this past Saturday night in Baton Rouge, Tiger Stadium against LSU. Ended up losing by like 8 or 9 points. But LSU had some injury problems in that game too. But LSU, another team that I don't think is as good as what we thought they were to begin with. NC State, I think, is going to cover the spread here slightly. It's not going to be a blowout. This will probably be a 14, 15-point victory by the Wolfpack, but they're going to take care of business at home against Syracuse and move it to 4-1 on the season. Baylor on the road at Kansas State looked like they found a little bit of something last week. That's going to get dashed. Kansas State had a week off. They got to be hurting from that loss to Vanderbilt on the road. They're 17-point favorites at home, so I think they'll cover the spread there. I think this is going to be at least a 3-touchdown victory against Baylor. Kansas State definitely put up some points. Oh, excuse me. Let the dog out. Florida State on the road at Wake Forest. Wake Forest is a 7.5-point underdog at home. They're undefeated. Their quarterback's been playing well, John Wolford, but they kind of, I thought that they would really cover the spread more than what they did this past week against Appalachian State in Boone. I thought that, we'd see, kind of a beatdown of sorts there. That was a 5.5-point spread, and I thought they'd win that game by several touchdowns. But it didn't happen. They had to rely on a blocked field goal at the end to win that game, and I just think that Florida State, they are 0-2. Like, got a monkey wrench thrown into their season. They've lost their quarterback. Lost, playing time due to the hurricane and stuff. I think they're going to be ready. I think they're going to be ready to make a statement. I mean, they have more talent than Wake Forest. They're, superior athletically to Wake Forest. I mean, it's just the fact of the matter. And I think that team's going to be looking to prove themselves. Their running backs, that Akers kid, he hasn't done a lot this year so far. I think they're going to show out in BB&T Stadium on Saturday afternoon and probably win this game by a couple of touchdowns. Florida State covers the spread against Wake Forest and takes win number 1 on the season. I mean, you got to look at it. When's the last time Florida State was 0-3? Got to be back in, the 70s, early 70s maybe? I don't see it. Georgia on the road at Tennessee. Another interesting one. Not to most folks. Everybody thinks Georgia's going to blow them out, so they're just, they're going to just annihilate Tennessee. This one's going to be over by halftime. They're going to give Butch Jones his pink slip after the game, and yada 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 yada. Wait, let's pump the brakes. First of all, I'm not sold on Georgia. If you watched any of my videos earlier in the week, you'll see that I'm not impressed with them. The fact of the matter is, I'm a South Carolina Gamecock fan. That's probably, besides Clemson, our most hated rival. And I mean, these people are just obnoxious. They'll get on your nerves. I mean, they will. They're going to win the national championship every year. I mean, every year is Georgia's year. Even when they're in obvious rebuilding mode, they will come up and spin something to you about how they're going to, go to the BCS, or, well, it's not the BCS anymore, or whatever. They're going to, win the SEC East this year. It's just, they are. That, obviously, to their credit, they do look better this year than they have in the past. Winning on the road at Notre Dame was impressive. I don't care if Notre Dame was 4-8 last year and it's a run-of-the-mill team. The running backs play well. That quarterback, the kid, Jake Fromm, he didn't play that well at Notre Dame. They won that game on defense, and obviously the Mississippi State game on defense. So if they can, they'll win. But these games have come down to a touchdown or less, like 8 of the last 9 times. And I'm not looking for Tennessee to just roll over and play dead. There's kind of a thing, kind of circling the wagons. Or is this going to be Butch's last stand? I mean, there's got to be a lot of emotion here in this game, especially coming off the performance they had last Saturday at home against UMass, one of the worst teams in FBS. I look for Tennessee to make this thing close. I look for a game that's something like last year. I look for an exciting game. I don't necessarily think Tennessee's going to win it, but I do think they'll keep it closer than the 7-point margin. And Georgia can keep scratching their head as to whether they're, national championship worthy or not. They're not.